guys, Cal here, and today we're going to be talking about something with bike setup, and it's going to be suspension and how to get it dialed in for your bike, your riding style, what shock you have, and just kind of like the super basics on how suspension works and how to set it up. Right now we're just going to talk about air suspension. Very nice little hot rod. Alright, the first thing we're going to talk about here is air pressure and sag. What sag means is it's the kind of neutral setting when you're on the bike weighted where the suspension sits in its travel. And this is super important to have in the right spot for you and your riding and your shock. Too harsh, if there's too much pressure, or if there's not enough, it'll kind of really wallow around and the bike will sit in a weird part of its suspension travel. On RockShox products here, they have it anodized on the stanchions, the percent of travel. Also on the rear shocks they do. And then most shocks have these little rubber O-rings on the forks too, and those are just used to see where the suspension sits. If you don't have one of those, the little O-rings, a perfect trick is just to tie a zip tie on there, not too tight because you don't want to scratch the stanchions or anything, and cut it off after you're done with the setup. There's kind of a general rule of thumb with rear shocks, and it's take your body weight, well, your rider weight, which means your body weight with your shoes, pack, helmet, everything on, then add 15 psi. It's kind of a general rule of thumb that works as a good starting point for most shocks and most frames. For me, with gear, I'm about 185, maybe plus or minus a couple pounds. So that means my shock puts it right about 200 psi, and that's about what I run usually. It's kind of the way the frame is on this bike. You kind of got to run like 205, 210. So now, this is very important. When working with air suspension, there's a specific type of pump that you're supposed to use, and it's this. It's a shock pump. It's made exactly to adjust suspension, and that's it. It's not made for inflating tires or anything like that. It's just for suspension. They're reasonably cheap, and it's worth having your own to make adjustments. You don't want to use certainly not an air compressor and not a tire pump either, because those are very high volume. And that can lead to problems with the suspension. So you want to get one of these nice little purpose-made shock pumps. And then once you've got your shock pump, what you're going to want to do is take it and find your air port, the valve on the shock, which on most shocks is on the top here. On this one it's right here. Unscrew the cap, which I already did, and thread on your shock pump. And when you get it tight enough on there, it's going to give you a pressure reading. We put about 205, 210 in there, so for a couple pumps it's up to right about 210. Unscrew the pump. Be sure to put on the valve cover. These are important, not so much with tires but with suspension, because you don't want any grime getting in that valve, or possibly into the air chambers or anything. Very lightly holding the front brake of the bike is cycle it through a couple times to make sure that the air is equalized. After you think you've got the right air pressure, you're going to take this little O-ring, or the zip tie, whichever you have, and push it all the way up to the dust wiper. Sit on the bike very, very gently. Just lift your legs up, and then put them down, and get off the bike nice and slow. Alright, now as you can see, I put a little bit more in there, and now it's sitting right at 30%, which is where I want it to be. There's no set number. Most shock and bike manufacturers suggest 25 to 33 psi, percent sag in the back, which is usually about correct. It really depends on your frame design, your shock, and just kind of, it'll be different from bike to bike, and it's also down to a little bit of personal preference on where you want that to be. So get a good base setting, mess around with it, see where you feels best for you, and stick with that. Now on to the front. It's just like the back. And on one of the top of one of the stanchions, there will be things that says air. That's the air valve cover. Just unscrew that. And you'll see the needle move when it hits the air pressure. It's screwed onto. Yep. My fork right now is at just about 80 psi, 85, somewhere around there. Fiddle around with it, see where you want it to be, and just kind of you'll figure it out after a while. It's up to personal preference. Also, the exact fork you have, your weight, the angles on the bike will kind of play somewhat into this too. Alright, so now that you've got the sag and everything down, what you're going to do is just head out for a ride and see how it feels. Remember, if it feels kind of too harsh or too springy, take some air out. It's all about kind of working out, finding a good balance and pushing much back. And yeah, kind of get what you think is going to be a good starting point, and then go out and ride it, see how it feels, and make your adjustments. Alright, so now you've got it. You've ridden on the bike a little bit after you got your baseline setup done. Once you got the air pressure figured out, then that's when you can start adjusting rebounding compression. Rebound is when the shock is compressed and it rebounds back to its resting place, and compression is when it compresses up, absorbing an impact or any kind of force. There's adjustments in there for how much dampening there is on the rebound and compression circuits. With no dampening, it would just soak up everything and be like a pogo stick. On RockShox forks, with the pike here, we have our compression adjuster up here, and some other forks, like a DVO, and some other companies have high and low speed compression. The difference between high and low speed is high speed is, say if you were coming down this really fast, hitting the little rocks where it's making the suspension move really, really fast. It has nothing to do with how fast you're going. It's how, if it's like square hits, kind of where it forces the shock or the fork to move really rapidly. Low speed compression, also rebound, is slower things. Think about the G-force of in a big berm going fast south. You kind of squash the suspension, and that is the kind of stuff, or say landing a big jump, that's slow speed where the suspension might be under a lot of load, but its actual movement is rather slow. If your fork is bottoming out or your shock is bottoming out a lot, you don't want to put more air in it because it's going to make it too harsh. And the forks, they're like little plastic circles. In the back, they're little plastic bands. And what they do is they just take up space in those air chambers to make it lower volume, which means there's more of a ramp up through its stroke, which means you can have more bottom out support and more mid-range support, but you won't sacrifice the small bump compliance as much as you would if you just put more air in it. Also, a company here in Grand Junction called MRP has a kit for a lot of RockShox forks. It's a retrofitting kit for their ramp control, I think is what it's called, cartridge. So what it is, it replaces the top cap and it has a clicker on the top that can adjust it on the fly without having to take the fork apart, let all the air out, and screw tokens on. I know they make it for Pike, Lyric, Yari, and Boxer right now. And if you look at their Instagram page, you'll see a spy shot of them testing it on a Fox 36. So I bet stuff for Fox forks is coming very soon from them. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and it helped explain some suspension, the basics of it, and how to get it set up. Obviously it's going to be all up to personal preference, terrain, how big of a rider you are, what kind of bike you have. It's going to, all that kind of stuff. So just basically find your good setting, mess around with it until you find the sweet spot. Thanks for watching, have a good day.